Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Hi. Happy New Year. This is our first event for 2019. I'm Monique Yelder. I am the chapter lead for the Valley Forge chapter of the Women's Impact Network. It's nice to see some familiar faces, some folks that have been here to our events before, and some new faces, so that's pretty good. I'm very excited about this afternoon's topic. I'm going to briefly introduce our guest for the hour, Miss Lara Heacock, and then she's going to run her magic, and we have food refreshments over there, so please don't be shy. Make sure you grab something before you leave. And without further ado, I'll just do Lara's Heacock so we can jump right in. Her bio so we can jump right in. So Lara is a leadership coach who brings over 20 years of experience in corporate America. She runs a popular personal development blog, kindovermatter.com, and works with professionals and companies to help them use kindness to build confidence and the epidemic of burnout in America. Lara's background includes working in companies ranging from small, privately held firms to multinational organizations. In over a decade of leadership, she has managed geographically dispersed teams and mentored and coached associates in both the U.S. and abroad. Lara has an MBA. She's a certified coach, award-winning writer, speaker, author of the book Practical Kindness, and co-host of the podcast Doing Good Business. Lara is obsessed with building corporate cultures that are rooted in kindness and ending the epidemic of burnout. You can download Lara's Kind methodology at laraheacock.com and get daily doses of kindness at kindovermatter.com. Without further ado, welcome Lara to Marigas.
Thank you. Whew. I'm going to talk about an inner critic trigger. Having that read out to a whole bunch of people, it never fails. So thank you so much. Thank you very much for having me. I am excited to be here. I am really passionate about kindness. I kind of refer to myself as a kindness ambassador. And today I'm going to talk to you about managing your inner critic through kindness. So before we get started, I want to tell you one thing, and that is that everyone on the planet has an inner critic. I do, you do, the person next to you does, your boss does, boss's boss, Oprah, the Queen of England. They all have a critic, I promise. So collective sigh of relief, right? Like big deep breath, sigh. What this means is that it's not just you. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. You're not supposed to be over it by now. Nobody else has it all figured out. Everybody around has the same challenges. So after that collective sigh of relief, the next most common thing I hear is why? Why in 2019, when we have put people on the moon and we are all walking around with computers in our pockets and our bags, why do we still have this critical inner voice? So I'm going to give you a little background on what the popular accepted theories are on why we have an inner critic. And the first is that it's partly evolutionary. So if we think about our ancestors in cave people times when they were all running around trying to avoid getting eaten by saber-toothed, our brain kept us motivated, kept us safe, kept our species surviving, was fear. And fear lives in the very oldest part of our brain. Now, you're going to hear me oversimplify a lot of brain science today, so I'll ask you to give me some grace. But very basically, fear is the oldest. It's called the lizard brain or the reptilian brain, anything like that. Fear lives in the amygdala. Our ancestors running around, got to be safe with saber-toothed tigers, can't get eaten, have to survive. Fear was what motivated them. Fear was what kept them safe. And fear, evolutionarily, is still with us. And quite honestly, we need it to be. People did not have fear because then we'd all be running out into traffic. We'd be diving off of cliffs without parachutes. Fear is actually something that we need. But because it's 2019, a little bit of that extra fear is often the way that our inner critic comes out. So the second side is that it is largely accepted that the inner critic voice, the way the voice actually manifests, so what you hear, what it says to you, the constant refrain that goes on in your head, it's widely accepted that that is a misinterpretation of something a parent or caregiver has said to us at some point when we're a kid. So kid brains and adult brains, very different. Kid brains are still forming. They don't know how to interpret things. They don't have that executive functioning feature. So if you come home and 9, 10 years old. Kid brain is typically anything under like 11-ish years old. So 9 years old, you come home, You get a 92 on your spelling test, and you're like, I got a 92! And parent or caregiver says, wow, how can we get you to 100 next time? Parent or caregiver probably only wants what's best for you. They probably want you to be the most successful, best version of yourself. But what kid brain can hear and what kid brain can misinterpret is, oh gosh, it has to be perfect in order for X, in order for love me, for me to be okay. Of kid brain that kid brain makes when they hear the parent or caregiver say, hey, how can we get you to 100 next time? That often becomes an inner critic. That can become an inner critic that says, you're not good enough. It can become an inner critic that says, whoo, everything's got to be perfect or nothing's ever going to be okay. That can become an inner critic that drives us towards burnout, that drives us towards perfection, and tells us that we're never ever going to be good enough all the time. Two very simplified pieces of why we have an inner critic. And the critic comes in the room. And the critic is annoying. Like, you want to apply for a promotion, you want to ask for a raise, you want to go and, try something new or take on a new project or make that first phone call to a new client. Who's going to be there right with you? The critic. And the critic is going to sound in a few different ways. The critic might sound harsh or hostile. And a harsh or hostile critic is going to sound like, ain't no way you're getting that promotion. You better just not even try it. That's a harsh or hostile critic. A critic could also be sarcastic. A critic might say, like, what do you think? Come on, like, that's crazy. You don't want that promotion. Like, God, this guy's too much extra time. There's no way. This is definitely a sarcastic voice. Or the critic can be highly logical, and this one's real tricky. This is the critic that says to you, well, Derek and Kim, they got their degree from a better school, and they're going to apply for that too, so you probably shouldn't even bother, because Derek and Kim are going to have the leg up on you. So the critic can show up in any of these ways, and what is important to remember is its goal is always the same. So no matter what it sounds like, whether your critic is harsh, whether it's sarcastic, whether it's like super logical, its goal is to keep you safe from that perceived saber-toothed tiger. So even though it's showing up today in 2019 with our pocket computers and people going to the moon, it's showing up as this voice that keeps us stuck and keeps us small. Fear thinks that it's actually keeping us safe. And at the very most fundamental level, our brains are not wired to make us happy or to feel content or to reach self-evolvement. Our brains are wired to keep us safe. So the critic is doing its job. And it's often showing up from that place of that wounded little kid that misinterpreted what their parent or caregiver said when they got a 92. And this is how we typically respond. So of course we do, right? The critic is kind of jerky. The critic is showing up and it's telling you that everyone is better than you. It's telling you you shouldn't even bother to try. Our natural response is anger and frustration. Or maybe we even fight back. Or maybe we just wanted to shut up. There's a lot of stuff out there. I got to tell you, it sells a lot of internet books about tell your critic to buzz off, fight your critic, beat it down, get it to go away. You guys can probably guess I don't believe in all of that. But the truth is it doesn't work. And I will caveat that by saying that you may get a quick hit. So you may get your critic to be quiet enough just for a moment. You may shove it down or suppress it long enough that you can walk into your boss's office and have a conversation about the raise. But it's not a long-term solution. And there's a cost. The cost to engaging with your critic in the same way that it engages with you over time is increased stress and lower confidence. So research shows that people that engage this way with themselves, that engage with the critic in this critical way, we raise our cortisol levels. Cortisol is directly related to stress. I'm sure you've all seen the studies on the terrible things stress does to us all the time. So imagine putting your body in a constantly stressed out state by arguing with the critic and fighting back and telling it to buzz off. Also, it lowers our confidence. So even though you have those occasional quick hits where you get the critic to shut up long enough, you go and you ask for the raise, maybe you even get the raise, even though we have those occasional quick hits, over the long term, and this is talking about 10 years of research, confidence is shown to go down. So when we're fighting our critic, what we're really doing to ourselves, not only are we increasing that wound, so thinking back to that little inner kid, we're deepening the wound instead of healing the wound, but we're also increasing our stress and lowering our confidence. So I want to try something that looks a little bit like this instead. Again, thinking about that kid, thinking about how do we now go to treating ourselves with compassion? How do we use kindness as a tool to engage in this critic? Because I don't want to increase my stress. I certainly don't want to lower my confidence. And I know now that research is showing me that when we engage in that critical way, that is what we're doing. The good news is that there's benefits to kindness. The research has shown that people who are self-compassionate, they're mentally healthier over the long term. They're more resilient. And by resilient, I mean when you get that no, or when you get that disappointment, when you have a professional or a personal disappointment, how can you bounce back? You know, are you down for the count because you just have no tools of resilience, or are you able to kind of heal yourself and reach out for some connection and bounce back and start going again? Self-compassionate people are shown to be more resilient. They're better able to cope with difficult situations, personal health challenges, family situations, anything that life throws your way. People who are kind to themselves and who practice self-compassion are much more likely to be able to deal with difficult situations in a healthier way. They're more caring in relationships. I believe the relationship we have with ourselves sets the foundation for every relationship we have in every area of our life. So coworkers, partners, friends, family, parents, spouses, kids, the relationship that we have with ourselves really sets the tone for that. So it naturally goes to say, when we're more compassionate with ourselves and with that critic, we're also going to get the benefit of being more compassionate in relationships. And finally, people who are self-compassionate tend to take better care of themselves. We actually start to care about ourselves. Instead of constantly fighting with ourselves and putting ourselves down and believing what the critic tells us as our truth, we actually start to care and think, gosh, I really should go get my physical this year. Let me make sure I get my mammogram. Let me make sure I eat foods that nourish my body, and let me move my body in a way that feels good. And the second part is that people who are self-compassionate strive to reach goals because they want to reach their full potential. And I will tell you, this is the number one question that I get. People often think, well, but if I stop pushing myself, if I'm not critical anymore, I'm never going to accomplish anything. We have this belief system, which is a fallacy, that says that everything I got, everything I've achieved at this point is because I pushed, I kicked, I fought, I screamed, I told the critic to shut up. And that's a fallacy. What we now know is that people who are self-compassionate still reach their goals. They still work to better themselves. The reason that they do it is what's different. When you talk to a self-compassionate person who's kind to themselves, they want to reach a goal because they actually believe that they are deserving of reaching it. They reach a goal because they want to live a full, well-rounded life. When you talk to somebody who's critical and who's mean to themselves all the time and who engages like those fighting kangaroos do with the critic, they think that once they reach the goal, then they'll feel good enough. Then they'll feel okay. It's that same inner kid coming back of, when I get 100, then it's going to be okay. When everything's perfect, then it's going to be okay. So the goal that we set for ourselves becomes this dangling carrot that we can never, ever reach. Self-compassionate people still want to reach their goals. They still do reach their goals. They succeed. They move ahead in their careers. They accomplish amazing things because they want to reach their full potential. I'm going to pause there for a minute and see if there's any questions, thoughts churning. See a lot of writing. Yeah, question. Fear of failure. Yeah, definitely. So the question was, how does fear of failure work into one of those three critical voices? I think fear of failure is kind of the other side of the perfectionism coin. If we want to be perfect all the time, it's probably super scary to fail because that means that we're not perfect. So your voice, it may sound critical. It may even be, and we'll get into this in a little bit, but it may just be a physical feeling. It may not be a cognitive tape that runs in your head. There may just be a feeling. But I think fear of failure and perfectionism are very closely linked. Does that feel true for you? Yeah? Cool. Thank you. All right. So how do we do it, right? Sounds great. Sign me up. How do I do it? Want to be kind, want to be self-compassionate, want to lower my stress, want to increase my confidence. I'm going to teach you the way to do it. Super simple acronym. It's also on your handouts, the 3 N's. The first N is notice. So notice, and this is actually your question, was super well timed. When I say notice, what I mean is, how does my critic in particular show up? Is it a harsh voice? Is it really sarcastic? Is it tricky and logical and actually makes me kind of want to believe it because it's making a really good case for itself? So how do I see my critic? When do I hear my critic? What's going on in my head when the critic comes up? And the other side of notice is the somatic side. So somatic means of the body. So when your critic is showing up, do you notice that your stomach gets tied in knots, or that your shoulders go up to your ears, or maybe you've got little fists on the ends of your arms? What do you notice somatically when the critic shows up? Because we all have different entry points. And the notice part of it is figuring out, okay, is it the tape that's in my head? Is it the fear of failure? Is it the fists at the end of my arms? Is it the churning stomach? What's my entry point to make sure that I can notice that my critic is trying to take over and drive the car right now? So the first N is notice. The second N is name. And I actually mean name. My critic is Dottie. She's great. We're going to talk about her in a little bit. Give your critic a name. And the only rule that I have for naming your critic is that it cannot be a mean or unkind name. I referenced earlier, a lot of people out there trying to sell you about the monster and the gremlin and the inner goober and all these kind of things. That is not a name for your critic that is going to heal a wound. That's a name that is actually going to deepen the wound. So think about what you want to name her. And the benefit of naming your critic is that you start to get some separation. So we all walk around thinking that this critical voice, well, it must be true, right? It's a voice that's in my head. It wouldn't be a voice in my head if it wasn't true for me. But actually, the critic is just the fear. It's just that misinterpretation of something that we heard as a kid. So when we name that critical voice, we start to separate it from ourselves. So I can engage with Dottie, and I can talk to her, and we can go, a couple of rounds of compassion, and she'll push back, and she gets real tricky. But I'm going to engage with her because she has a name. And just that act of saying, oh, hey, that's Dottie. Dottie's on the scene, is the first step for me to know that that's not my truth. That's just fear showing up. That's just the critical voice showing up. And that's time for me to move into the nurture step. So the nurture step is where we actually apply the self-kindness, the self-compassion. So how does Dottie need me to engage with her in this moment? Maybe she just needs me to say to her, oh, honey, I hear you. Thank you so much. I know you're just doing your job. I know that your job is to keep me safe. And I know that you think that me doing this big thing is going to put me at huge risk and it's going to make me feel unsafe. But I'm okay. And I've got this. And I'm in the driver's seat now. And you can be here and we can do this together. But you at least have to sit in the back seat. You absolutely can't drive. But I'm going to keep us safe right now. So maybe Dottie needs me to engage with her like that. Maybe she needs some somatic support. Maybe she does need some physical support. And this is, I don't mean you don't have to give yourself a huge bear hug. You totally can if that's what your critic likes. But I'm thinking maybe you're in a meeting and it's not really going to be cool to give yourself a giant bear hug, right? So think about touch. Think about what we know about infants. And when infants are deprived of touch, they actually stop developing. I think it's true for all of us, even as adults, probably a little bit less than infants. But you can actually somatically soothe the critic and nurture her. So maybe it looks like you just hold your hand under the meeting in a boardroom. Maybe it looks like you kind of do like this. You could rest your hand on your face, but that's like a self-soothing gesture, having your hand to your face. Maybe it is just, putting a hand on your lap and connecting with yourself. Some sort of physical way of soothing the critic and giving her that nurturing instead of just oh my God, I can't believe you're here. This is my one shot in this meeting. I'm totally going to blow it. And won't you just shut up? And going in that way that just increases that stress reaction. And it becomes a cycle. So fear shows up. Critic is on the job, because that's what the critic is supposed to do. We start fighting the critic. We go a few rounds of battle. Critic's probably going to win. And then the next time fear shows up, the critic has even more ammunition to use against us as to why it's not going to work. Hey, you remember last time. You remember how badly that went. You better not try it again. When we interrupt that cycle and we practice these 3 N's and we practice the self-kindness and the nurturing step, the critic calms down. It literally has a soothing effect that lowers our stress. And then each time we do it, it gets a little tiny bit quieter and a little tiny bit calmer. And as you practice it, it becomes more inherent. If you think about the favorite analogy I like to use is If any of you have ever gone hiking, you know that there are paths that are cleared. So they're maintained by the Forest Service. They're the ones that everybody walks on all the time. And then occasionally there's some like rogue renegade paths on the side, but they've got a lot of weeds overgrown. They're really hard to trek through. Our brains work in a very similar way. They're called neural pathways. So the pathway that we choose, or the habit that we choose most consistently becomes that cleared path. So when self-criticism is our consistent pathway, that's always going to be the choice that you want to go to because it's familiar, and familiar is what our brains love. They love it. But the more you go off that side path, and the more you play with the self-kindness and the self-compassion and the nurturing step, the clearer that path is going to become. So that main path is going to start to get overgrown, and that side path is going to start to become clear, and it's going to become more accessible, and you're going to know how to take it the more you play with it. So this is the fun part, and I know that Chrissy and the wonderful people that brought me here today had started talking about some potential volunteers. And this is what I want to work through. I want to see if there's maybe one or two people, because we have lots of awesome questions already, and I want to leave lots of Q&A time. But I want to see if there's one or two people that would be willing to do some critic work, some 3 Ns with me, where we can practice really tapping into how your personal critic shows up. How do you name it? What do you want to name it? What do you want to call the critic? And then what maybe would work for you as a way to start nurturing and a way to start stepping into some self-kindness and self-compassion. And I have presents for volunteers too, so it's not all just hard work. Oh my goodness, nobody wants to hang out with me and Dottie? Oh, all right, Jean in the back, thank you. So we'll do one at a time and we'll see how long, but you want to be number 2? All right, perfect, thank you. Yay. Oh yeah, we're going to give Jean a mic probably. Yeah, come on up here. I'm going to move these chairs. I was thinking we would use chairs. What do you prefer, Jean, sitting or standing?
A chair.
All right, chair. A chair it shall be. Pull up right beside you.
Do I need this, or am I holding this for you? You need both.
We're going to do both. One is for the video and one is for the room. I learned that earlier.
Okay.
All right, big round of applause for Jean. Yay! Great volunteer. All right. So, hi.
Hi.
Thank you.
Good to see you again.
Good to see you too. So tell me about a situation where your critic comes up. Like, when would you notice the critical voice showing up or the critical experience?
When I want to try something new. And I'll go outside of work. Like if I want to try something, or even a new social event. Going somewhere where I had to meet my husband's ex-wife.
Big critic trigger.
How's that?
Big critic trigger. Yep, totally get it. That's a great example. So what did you notice? So think about that event. So you're getting ready. You're like, oh my God, this is the thing. I have to meet his ex-wife. What was your experience of that? What did you notice?
I was very nervous. I felt like, oh my God, she's going to, he's going to be comparing us. I'm not as pretty as she is. I'm not as skinny as she is, but I have bigger boobs. So that's good.
Awesome. So that was great. So that's the
right?
running in your head.
Stuff like that goes through your head. You know?
So what was your physical experience? You said nervous. So what does nervous mean to you?
Like I am a little bit now. I'll be a little fidgety, shifting
fidgety.
around. And it's funny you talk about the fists.
That's my personal
I do
one.
that.
I'm sometimes laying in bed with fists. That's how I know I'm like, whoo, Laura's stressed out.
And it's weird. I think I'm fine, and I have a fist, and my husband just gently comes over.
Aww.
And I don't even notice I'm doing it. It's so prevalent.
Nice.
Or I'll play with my hair, or I'll play with my jewelry, or whatever. It's my nervous fidgets.
Awesome. Okay, so we've got a lot of good data. So what we know now is that Jean's critic is likely to go into a comparison place of she's going to be this, she's going to be this, blah, blah, blah. And then there's a little retaliation of like, oh, but I have bigger boobs, so there's that. And then what she also notices is the fidgetiness. Maybe she's playing with her hair, futzing with her jewelry, or anything like that. There might be some fists going on too. So those are your entry points. So when you notice that script of comparison coming up in your head, or when you notice the fidgetiness, you know that your critic is on the scene.
Absolutely.
So what do you want to name her?
Oh my gosh. Julie.
Julie. Perfect. Perfect.
I hope there's no Julies in here. I'm sorry.
So Julie, it's really nice to meet you. And I'm curious, what is it in those moments, especially in that fidgety moment when you're thinking about this event, getting ready to meet your husband's ex-wife, you're feeling really nervous, the comparison's going strong, you're fidgety. What do you think would be a way to nurture Julie? What do you think she might benefit from in that moment?
Well, you said something interesting that really stood out for me, in that the inner critic is about keeping you safe. Mm-hmm. I never made that connection.
Yeah.
I just thought I don't even know what I thought it was. Actually,
nobody does. We're just like, what is this voice? Why do I have this? Make it stop.
So before knowing that, because knowing that gives a whole different perspective of how to talk to it.
Yeah.
So, but what I did is I just reassured myself, which is along the lines of safety, that my husband loves me and loves me for who I am and for what I do and for how I look and for how I dress and all of that sort of stuff, regardless, unconditionally.
Yeah.
So that is putting me in a point of safety compared to feeling like, oh, if I'm not as good as she is or whatever, he won't love me as much, or I'm not good enough, or whatever. But he did divorce her, so that is a sign.
Yeah. So it sounds like you actually had a little bit of this already, and now maybe the extra tool is to really talk to her as that separate entity, to notice like, oh, that's Julie. Julie's here. Julie's scared I'm going to get hurt. Julie's triggered and she's up right now and fear is really up. So what would make her feel safe? Letting her know that, Julie, I get it. But I know that this man loves me. I know that he chooses me. He's chosen me through marriage. He chooses me every day. And we're going to rock this in this awesome new dress. Like something like that, to engage with her just on a little bit more external basis. So it's not feeling like you're just talking to this voice that maybe is true, but seeing that she's an external entity and that she's just a little scared piece of you that doesn't want to get hurt.
Right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I have a present for you. Thank you, microphone crew.
Oh, yeah, I'll walk with that.
I was going to say, I'll hug you when I don't have mics on because that'll probably make terrible video. Thank you. Next. Is there anybody else? I think we might have time for 3. Gina's already like a little ahead of the game with nurture. Thank you. Do you want your present first? No. Chair or stand?
I'll sit.
Okay. Thank you. Hi.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Thank you for coming up.
Thank you.
So can you, you guys are awesome. Can you tell me about a time when your critic was like loud and in charge?
Just Monday.
How handy.
Yeah. Last week, some of the ladies and I went out for dinner with some executives. And I make cards.
Okay.
That's what I do, for my creative outlet.
Oh, that's fun.
So I made cards for the executives as a way of saying thank you. And the voice, I bring the cards to work and I said, the ladies are not going to like them. They're not going to want me to give them out. I'm not exactly sure why you did.
Like, this is stupid. What did you bring these cards for?
Yeah. They were awesome.
Oh, yay.
But that was she showed up.
Yeah. So what was so you got clear on the voice, right? The voice says, like, why are you doing this?
Yeah, why
this
are
is
you doing
stupid.
this?
You shouldn't have, they're going to hate them. This is silly.
Failure, embarrassment, shame, your talent is worthless.
So what's the somatic experience of that? Thank you for the external validation.
What do you mean?
What's your, do you notice anything that happens? Jean had shared that she
I got
fidgeted.
sick. The cards went into my bag. Like I wasn't going to give them out. I just pretended they weren't in there, and they kept screaming at me. You spent time on me, And so I left.
So you felt sick.
I did. I get really sick.
Me too.
Really, really sick. Panic in the eyes. Like I just want to go home. Why am I putting myself out on a limb like this?
So stomach
they're
sick?
Cards. They're not like a presentation to my boss.
So stomach sick is totally a normal stress reaction because the longest nerve in our body, the vagus nerve, it goes straight from brain to stomach. There's a couple stops in between, but I told you I was going to oversimplify. So those of you like me and like us up here that get some stomach stuff with stress and with the inner critic, total normal human response. Just like to normalize things as much as I can.
Yeah.
All right, so now we have noticed. So we know that your critic is telling you, this was stupid, you shouldn't have done it. So that's the cognitive piece of it. And the somatic piece is you start feeling really sick, maybe you get a headache, maybe your stomach is like, ugh, got to be near a bathroom, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
So what do we want to name her?
Well, her name is Becky.
Oh, Becky.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming, Becky. I know you don't like to invite Becky to the party, huh?
She doesn't come out very often.
What do you think that Becky would really... So think about Becky, right? And maybe picture yourself when you were a young kid, or if you have children, or if there's a young child in your life that you love. I personally don't have kids. My best friend has a 10-year-old, so he's a great kind of touch point for me in Critic Talk. But if you picture a young kid that you really love, what would you want to say to that kid who's just scared and who feels like she did something stupid? Like, what would actually nurture her in that moment when she shows up? Because I can tell you're frustrated with her.
Yeah.
And has that kept her away?
No.
Yeah.
No, but it doesn't stop me either because I took the cards
Well,
out
high five
of the
to that.
bag, showed them to my colleagues just to see if they would be interested in doing it. And they loved them. And then the validation came this morning. I had to go upstairs to do something, and I poked my head in the office of one of the executives, and there on his desk was our card.
Oh, so you've got a great example. Through this external validation, that's a really great example of what Becky might need in that moment. Like what
Yes,
you
she
could
did
tell
need
her.
that.
And then you can engage with that with her because it's so great, and we all need external validation. It's amazing. And think of how powerful it would be to be able to give that to yourself in the moment. When you're feeling frustrated with Becky, when she's like, this was stupid, how could you do this? And then you're getting sick over the whole thing. In that moment, be like, oh, Becky, oh my gosh, I know you're so scared that they're not going to like these. I bet there's some coworkers that are going to like them. Maybe I even need to reach out and connect with one of the people that I feel very safe with and get some of that in the moment. But what are some things that you might feel would be nurturing in that moment when she's trying
There's
to
really
drive?
not much because she's really a powerful voice
Yeah.
inside of my head. Because it's, the place is broken. It's like there's brokenness from, life. So you're trying to dance your way through like a broken trail.
Yeah,
Or,
it's a wound, right?
Yeah,
It's a
exactly.
wound. So what would soothe it? Is there anything that you can think of that would be soothing when she's around?
No, just doing it.
Just taking action?
Just taking the action.
Taking
and doing
action. And what about reaching out?
it. Two.
Anyone trusted?
I did do that.
Yeah, maybe some people in this room, and you can actually now, you've got some language to use. Like, you guys, Becky is so loud right now. Can we just have 5 minutes where I can, you can tell me that it's going to be okay, or I can get a hug, and I'm trying that whole, self-compassionate thing is not doing it for me right now, but can you help me with that? That could be a really great, when it feels too hard to do it for yourself, to have that compassionate dialogue with Becky, I always say reach out. Reach out to somebody you trust. Let them help you with the nurture step until you're more comfortable taking it on yourself.
Good idea. It's a very good idea.
Does that feel doable?
Doable.
Woo! Doable! Thanks, Becky. I love Becky. I want to give Becky a hug. I'm going to give you a hug when I'm not mic'd. Anybody want to do one more? These are going nice. Thank you so much. Thank you. One more. We've got lots of questions to answer, so it's okay. But I just feel like there might be one more person that wants to hang out with their critic a little bit. Woo! Oh my gosh. Bring it. You know Becky, right?
But she's very familiar with mine.
Oh, that's nice. A little relationship. You guys are so brave. Thank you. Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. All right. So, tell me about a time when that critic was like, woo, loud and in charge.
I would say the most recent was I recently got engaged, and
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I was going out and doing a bunch of bridal shows, and I hadn't invited my mom to one, and it was just going to be me and my fiance at the time going to one. And in my head, she had texted me and sounded like really upset about it, but she actually didn't care that she wasn't invited. So my inner critic was, should you invited her?
Should have invited mom.
Why didn't you invite her?
You're such a terrible daughter.
Yes.
How could you do this
Yes.
without your mom? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Got it. So your inner critic is really that harsh voice, that criticizing voice
Yes.
that's like, you should have done this. You should have been perfect. How could you not invite your mom? What's wrong with you?
Correct.
Awesome. Awesome. Physical experience? Any?
I bite my nails. I bite my skin, as you can see. I shave.
Universal things? Okay.
Yeah.
So
Play with
those
my
are
hair.
so those are your entry points, right? Like
Yep.
when you notice yourself like, oh, what am I doing? I'm picking at this nail again, or oh my God, I'm feeling kind of shaky. This is weird. Okay, something's going on. There's some fear at play. There's some critic at play. What do we want to call her?
Adda.
Adda?
Yeah.
A-T-T-A? Or
A-D-A.
A-D-A? Awesome.
So I
Adda.
can call her Adda girl.
Oh,
Together.
nice. All right, Adda. Nice
Yeah.
to meet you. So in those moments when it's like, should have done this, mom's not here, God, she's going to be pissed, this sucks, I'm not a perfect daughter, what's wrong with me? What does Adda need to hear, or what feels soothing, or what feels nurturing to her?
It's okay to do it alone. It's okay to not always make everybody happy.
Yeah.
I'm only one human being. So it's okay
Nice.
to do things on my own, even if it's going to upset one or two people out there.
And do you have evidence that shows that you can survive upsetting somebody?
Yes.
Yeah.
She didn't come.
Yeah.
She was fine with it.
And then what about that? Is there like a physical component that would feel good? Is it, maybe it's taking a deep breath when you notice yourself shaking, or maybe it's putting your hands in your pockets or something that would feel good?
It's kind of like out loud telling myself it's okay.
Nice.
Like I can tell myself in my head all the time it's okay.
But the out loud
until
part.
I tell myself it's okay,
Yeah.
it doesn't really feel okay. Or talking with somebody about it, talking to my fiance about
Mm-hmm.
it, telling him why I was feeling that way, or even talking to my mom about it.
Yeah.
Telling her I felt this way, and then her reassuring me that she wasn't upset at all.
Good.
So-
Good. So in that moment with Adda, the conversation might look like, oh my gosh, I know we're really scared that we probably hurt mom's feelings, and that kind of stinks. And we, of course, would apologize if that's the truth. And what I know to be true is that I'm one person, and I get to make my own choices. And if I want to be here with just my fiance in this moment, it's cool. And I know you're scared that we hurt mom's feelings, but I got this.
Yeah.
And I'm here now, and I can keep us safe, and we'll apologize to mom if we need to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
How's that feel?
Good. It feels. I just need to keep doing that.
Yeah,
I need to-
no, exactly. It's that pathway, right? You've
Yeah.
got to keep walking on the one that's right now a little bit overgrown, and then it'll start to clear out, and soon, but in time, it will become the path. I'm not a quick fix kind of gal, but that path will then become the one that is more natural to choose than right now, that path that's like, freaking out, why I should have done this, what's wrong with me, I can't ever make a right decision. Like the freak out path will become the second choice.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Yay. Thank you so much. All right, I'm going to stand up. Thank you, guys. Let's do one more. Oh, did I unmic? Hang on. I got it. I unmiked myself. Luckily, my critic is pretty cool right now, and she's not freaking out. One more round of applause, please, for our amazing volunteers. Thank you, guys. So, real talk. We had talked a bit about the pathway, and I accidentally said like soon it'll be. It's not soon. I'm going to tell you this is a process, and this is repaving neural pathways, clearing out brambles on the way, and our critics evolve just as we evolve. So my critic right now, Dottie, she's not mean. She's not harsh. We've gotten past that. And I've been doing this for probably a little over 5 years. So she's not aggressive or hurtful to me anymore, but she's logical. So now she tells me things like, it's raining. You don't really have to drive all the way in the city to go to that networking meeting. You probably saw those same people last month. No, it's only $15. It doesn't matter. So what I've done is I've gone back to the 3 N's. And I've relearned how in this phase of my life, Dottie is showing up. And I know that Dottie is here to do her job and to try and keep me safe, and she's just terrified that doing some next big thing is going to be the one thing that I can never recover from. So we go to the nurture step. It becomes, and for any of my IT people, it becomes an iterative process. So we always go back to noticing, how does the critic shift as we shift? How does it evolve as we evolve? Calling her by name, separating her from our truth, from ourself. We're engaging with something that is not necessarily inside of us, but engaging as if it's a separate entity, and then always that nurturing, self-kindness, self-compassion. Hey, sweetie, I got you. It's okay. Thank you for showing up. I know why you're here. Maybe give yourself a hand, anything like that. But I like to be real, and this is what it looks like. So Chrissy sent me some amazing questions that you all had shared with her before I got here, and we're going to shift into part of the program, and I'm just going to go straight into the first question. We'll go through these 5, and then we'll have time for other questions that come up because you guys had super smart ones. So the first question was, what can we do to accept our flaws for what they are today and still have the resolve to work on issues that we want to address? So I smiled like the biggest geek when I read this question because the answer is in the question. The answer is accepting our flaws for what they are today. Again, research has shown fighting our flaws does not help us change them. Fighting our flaws is not a long-term strategy for success. I believe in long-term strategy. I want every single one of my clients to have strategies that will serve them for the rest of their life. I do not do light bulb, light switch on and off work. Accepting your flaws and being compassionate towards them is the ticket to be able to want to improve things, again, because we feel like we want to have that full experience, not because we feel that we're broken or damaged and will only be okay or whole once we fix this thing. So I don't know whose question it is, and you do not have to out yourself if you don't want to, but is there anything in there that anybody is uncertain about? Is there anything in there that doesn't make sense? But really, I was like, the answer is in the question itself. It was so great. So acceptance first, and then once you've gotten to that accepted, calm place, then you can start to move forward. So next question. I read this study and I wrote about it because it totally blew my mind. I had previously heard data that people abandoned their resolutions by, it was January 20-somethingth, and then recently they just said January 12th. People abandoned their resolutions by January 12th. So what has worked for me to stay motivated to achieve a goal, whether personal or professional? I'm going to tackle that first. So what has worked for me, and you guys, because you're corporate gal myself, you've probably heard the term reverse engineering. Familiar? You know what that means? So I'll give you an example. Maybe your goal is you want to start a morning routine. So the morning routine is maybe you want 20 or 30 minutes to make yourself breakfast or to cook lunch or to go for a walk or to play with your dogs or to meditate or whatever you want your morning routine to be. But in reality, what's happening is like you did it for 2 days and then you just snooze straight through those 20 or 30 minutes. Big snooze fans here? Anyone? Just me? Cool. So reverse engineering would start with the goal. So if we need to get up at 6:30 to have this morning routine, and what we notice is that we cannot drag ourselves out of bed until 7, what is the first thing that I need to do to be able to get up at 6:30 and feel well rested? Well, maybe that's for me 7 hours of sleep. So I know that I need to be asleep by 11:30 to be able to get up at 6:30 without hitting snooze. Great. How long does it take me to fall asleep? 45-ish minutes. So I should probably be in bed sometime between 10:30 and 11. We're one step back. How much time do I need at home in the evenings after work to cook, spend time with family, do laundry, hang out with the dogs, do whatever it is I want to do? Maybe I need 3 hours. Well, then I'm back at 7:30. So what time do I need to leave work so that I'm home at 7:30 so that I can have my 3 hours, so I can be in bed at 10:30, so I can be asleep by 11:30, so I can get up at 6:30. So to be at home at 7, maybe I have to leave at 6, so that we just keep backing it up until we get to the very next step. So to leave work at 6, maybe you need to start winding down your day at 4:30, and then you need to schedule your meetings accordingly, and you will reverse engineer your way back to the next step, and then consistently you can be able to implement this goal and work towards it. Now I want to caveat all of this with what we strive for is progress, not perfection. So let's not set a goal that is every single day I will do my morning routine without fail. That is just another side of fear talking. So let's talk about maybe I want to strive for 3 days a week, and that is what I'm going to decide means success for me. So you reverse engineer your way through a typical day, and then when life throws you a curveball, you can reverse engineer through it, or you can give yourself the freedom to skip it because you're not trying to be perfect. You're trying to do better than you were before. So the second part of the question, what can we do to combat the negative self-talk thoughts when we feel we're not accomplishing goals as fast as we should? Should, talked a little bit about should before. Should is like the number one sign that the critic is on the scene. So you should be this, you should be that. I have a friend that says, stop shoulding all over yourself. I know, it's a good one. You guys can have that. So stop shooting all over yourself at first, really grounding in to what is your why? Why do you want to do this? And what is more important? Is the time frame, some arbitrary time frame that we've assigned to this goal, the most important thing, or is reaching the goal the most important thing? So just noticing, again, notice when those shoulds come up, that's time for some self-compassion, time to ground back into your why, and then stop shooting all over yourself. Awesome question. So I find a lot of times my inner critic rears its ugly head by going to a comparison trap. So we talked about some comparison traps, etc. How do we not do that, and how do we not get into a jealous-ridden negative trap? How do we use others for inspiration? So social media is like the pit of comparison trap, right? Like you're on Instagram, Facebook, like she's better, blah, 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 blah. So first step, if this is at all social media driven or if social media is a part of it, step back from the gram. Like just take a break from it, give yourself a moment. The second thing I like to tell people is we've all heard the phrase, don't judge a book by its cover. That usually means don't be a jerk to somebody before you get to know them. But it applies here too, because what we're seeing on Instagram is someone else's highlight reel. We don't really know what their inner experience is every day. Just like you don't know mine, I don't know yours, I don't know yours. We all know the full experience of our truth, and we all assume that what we see when we fall into that comparison mode is the full experience of someone else's truth. So remembering that what you're doing is you're actually just making an assumption and you're making a judgment about what you see, and reminding yourself that there's so much more beneath the surface, because you know that to be true for yourself, it's also going to be true for someone else. And again, grounding back into your why. Why am I trying to set this goal for myself? If I want to, feel better in my physical body, but I'm looking at someone and saying like, oh my God, she's so skinny, she probably feels so much better in her body. We don't know. We don't know. She may have something that is just not visible to the eye. Grounding back into, I want to feel good in my physical body because I want to enjoy my vacation in Rome this summer, whatever your why is. But noticing the comparison trap coming up, stepping away from social media if that's part of it, thinking about the book cover analogy and noticing that, or just remembering that you don't ever know someone's full experience, and to bring that back to yourself and why you're focused on your goal. So when I think of managing my inner critic, it's a negative sense. Can this ever be a positive thing? I'm betting you all know where I stand on that by now, but just in case, I don't believe it can ever be a positive thing, even when you get those occasional quick hits, because it perpetuates the cycle of fear, it perpetuates the cycle of self-hate, it perpetuates that critical voice actually thinking that it's doing the right thing, which as we now know is going to increase our stress and decrease our confidence. So even when you get that quick win, all that is an exception to the rule. When we want a long-term strategy to work with the critic, we always want to go to the compassion, kind side. How can you channel your negative thoughts into positive thoughts? So full disclosure, I believe that all thoughts are welcome in a well-rounded human experience. The trick is not getting stuck in them. So what we know about thought processes and how brains work is that typically when we get stuck, it's when we're trying to ignore it, when we're trying to suppress it, when we're trying to paint it over with a thin layer of positivity that's barely veiling what's really going on. So the first thing that we want to do is actually just let the negative thought happen, acknowledge that it's there, accept that it's there. Let's go back to the first question, how do we accept our flaws? Just accept, okay, I'm having a negative thought right now. What can I do to be kind to myself in this moment? And then letting the positive thoughts come. If you do notice that there is some stuckness going on, we have so research differs on this a bit, but we all are wired with a negativity bias, somewhere between 3-1 and 5-1, which means that we're somewhere between 3 and 5 times more likely to hang on to a negative thing than a positive thing. So there can be some work involved if you do feel some stuckness in the negative feelings. So keep that ratio in mind and think of a practice that would be good to you. Maybe 5 minutes of just journaling about the negative thought, getting everything out. You can throw the paper away, you can safely burn it, you can shred it. This never has to see anyone's eyes but your own. But 5 minutes, just set a timer, get out all the negative stuff, the things that you would never want to see the light of day, the things that you wouldn't want to tell your closest friend. And then somewhere between 15 and 20 minutes, again, because we're looking for that 3-1 ratio at least, 15 to 20 minutes is something that makes you feel great. Your favorite TV show, some music that always pumps you up, hanging out with a friend, just a change of scenery, getting outside, watching funny cat videos on YouTube, whatever it looks like. But keeping that ratio in mind, if you do notice some stuckness when you're trying to work through the negative feelings, you're trying to just accept them, but you notice that they're kind of lingering a little more, give yourself 5 minutes to go through them, and then at least 15 minutes to do something that shifts your energy, that makes you feel good, and that gets you out of that negative space. I think those are all 5. What other questions can I answer for you guys? So we learned a lot. We learned to not be those like fighting kangaroos with our inner critic. We learned to think about her as somebody that's just there to keep us safe. She's a manifestation of some real old evolutionary stuff in the amygdala, living in this 2019 world, and maybe a misconstrued voice from when we were a kiddo. And that's the image that I really want to leave you guys with, is remembering that inner kid. You know, what would you say to kid you or a kid in your life that you love that is talking to themselves the way that your critic is talking to you? You know, how do you want to engage with Adda or with Becky? How do you want to heal that wound with the kid? She's doing her job. She's trying to keep you safe. And when we think about it in those terms, I find it's actually really hard to go into that critical place. Any other questions? We have like 4 minutes left. If anybody has any other questions. Oh. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I would say that, so the question was, I'll say it for the video, the question was, what would I recommend to somebody who's doing really great and then they have a setback? They let the critic win, maybe they go into that place of like being aggressive with the critic, and then they feel like they just took 100 steps back. I would say to them, my gosh, I bet you are a perfectionist like me, and that you actually expected that you were going to do this perfectly, and how beautiful it is that you're having a full human experience. And it's okay to make a mistake. I go straight into that compassionate place. So there's a little bit of intellect there, right? There's some cognitive intellect about maybe this is actually a form of the critic itself. Maybe this is the critic coming back, kind of getting tricky again, and saying, well, you didn't do it perfectly, therefore there's no point in doing it again. You just better, we're just going to go with what we know. Getting compassionate and recognizing that that's just the critic showing up in a new, tricky way, and reminding yourself that it's actually okay to not be perfect, and nobody's perfect. What's true is that we're all having an imperfect experience, and what's untrue is that there is any way to do this perfectly. Does that help? Cool. One more? Mm-hmm. Mm. Our highways are insane. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So if we think about the first step in noticing, so the question was with driving. Anytime she takes a new route, it feels, really intimidating. She worries that she's going to make a lot of mistakes. So the first step is noticing, what are your thought patterns when you get in the car for the new route? It's probably something like, well, I have to leave an hour early because I always is a very close cousin to should. So when you think about the always, like you should leave an hour early because you always mess it up, that's like, oh, I'm doing that thing again. I'm shooting all over myself. And then really just noticing, like, maybe your critic has a name now, and you can say to her, critic, I know that you're scared that you're going to mess up. And actually, it's okay if you do, because we've left this extra time. But I'm not going to believe that it always has to happen this way. I'm going to try and believe a little bit that maybe this will be the time that I don't get lost. And if it's not, that's okay. Maybe I'll do it next time. But thinking about that process with yourself and what you notice when that fear comes up, because the fear is just, I'm going to be lost forever, and I'm never going to find my way out. I'm going to miss all the important things in my day. And, combating it with a little evidence of like, well, has it ever been such a catastrophe? Has it ever resulted in something that was terrible? And then just building back up through that nurturing and kindness practice, the confidence to be able to say like, okay, maybe I'll only leave a half an hour early because I know I'm not always going to get lost. I have the capacity to try this and to believe in myself to do it again. So kind of a little bit of nurturing, a little bit of kindness mixed with a little bit of just intellectual of, like, I've always survived this. It's always been okay. It's okay to be scared, that kind of thing. Yeah. Oh, it's okay. It's all right. Just a human experience. Nothing wrong with it. One more? Do you have your hand up? Hi. I do. I like the, so on one of the resources that I listed on the handout is the Insight Timer app. I love the Insight Timer app. Big fan of not doing anything perfectly. My meditation is, I was raising my hand with the snooze alarm example earlier. I've actually replaced snooze with a 10-minute meditation in the morning. That's like one behavior modification I've done for myself over the last year and a half or so. So there's a woman named Sarah Blondin. She has meditations on Insight Timer. They're all really self-compassionate. They're really focused on like nurturing yourself. She also has a podcast in case you just don't use the app or you prefer to get your media in that form. I love that. So yeah, I do use a little bit of meditation. And again, I don't try and do it perfectly. It doesn't happen every day, but on the days when I least want to do it, that's when I know I most need to do it. Awesome. All right. Thank you guys so much. All my social media is through Kind Never Matter. I'd love to connect with any of you. It's all welcome all the time. Thank you all.